We're back, chapter 5, and this is going to be part 2 because we just couldn't get the phone to cooperate there. So we're going to start with Sarah and her uncle, and they're just discovering Sarah's home was blown up, and she found the pictures of Sarah in the envelope of their home pictures. So we're going to start... It was a miracle, a blessed miracle. With slow, meticulous motion, she removed a 2-inch stack of photographs and shuffled through them one by one. Though they were stained from age and a few were torn, they were otherwise intact. When she found one of Sarah and her parents in front of their home in Berlin, she went rigid. In the picture, Sarah wore the gold locket Rena had given her for her birthday. Oh, God! How could this all be happening? With tears straining her sight, she brought the photograph to her lips and kissed it. Sarah, my Sarah. Her uncle stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. Without a word, he told her everything would be all right. But somehow, she knew, nothing would ever be all right again. Sarah was the golden thread that kept her sewn together. As they stood facing the pile of red bricks spotted with the beautiful leaves of autumn, the tears came harder. It wasn't fair. Hadn't the Nazis done enough? When would their crimes against innocent people stop? Her heart felt choked and sore inside her chest. After a few minutes, she caught her breath again. She understood now why Sarah hadn't come to fish with her on Sunday. I can't figure this out, Uncle Mosh. Don't armies have certain targets, governments, and army buildings? Why did Nazis bomb the houses of so many harmless people, like Sarah and her mother? As her uncle tried to comfort her, her mind saw Sarah's face, her chubby legs hanging over the edge of the bridge, the sheer talent of her flawless legato when she sang Debussy's Palais de Melanasta at their recital in Berlin, and the angelic countenance she carried whenever she spoke about the almighty Elohim. She can't be lost. She just can't be lost, she thought. When she heard the whistle of the train in the distance, an idea came to her. She pulled Uncle Mosh's sleeve. Maybe Sarah wasn't home when the bombing started. Maybe they were on the train leaving Poland. He patted her on the head and brushed a few leaves off her red jacket. That is very possible, Zitzget. Talking more with her hands than her mouth, she said, during the wedding, she told me her father sent them a letter telling them to get out of Poland as soon as possible. He nodded, his expression assuring her. Perhaps as a good wife, she obeyed that request. It likely saved them. Rena covered her mouth with her hand, her sadness turning an expression of marvel on her shiny cheeks. Uncle Mosh, I don't think Sarah is lost to us. I have a feeling she's only missing. Merciful and gracious from above would never allow something like this to happen to someone so spiritually gifted. I am full of agreement, Rena. One day, when the war was over and things were back to normal, she would see her again, and they would have that double wedding and sing songs with their children around a piano. That's the vision she would keep in her head. That and only that. As they walked back towards Nathason's food shop, Rena wiped her cheeks dry as she studied the rubble-filled side streets and back alleys of a ruined city. She wondered if the little Yiddish theater hidden among the old houses had survived, would still offer performances. The skyline of collapsed buildings made her knees weak, her belly filled with flapping wings, but she forced herself to keep up with her uncle's nimble pace. When she saw the bombed-out hospital where pregnant women and sick children had been exploded into oblivion, she felt goosebumps crawl up her legs and arms. This is where her father worked every day. The bloody Polish soldiers lying on the steps of the hospital waited for him to sew their limbs back together, to make their bodies whole again. She'd offered to help at the hospital, but her uncle convinced her it was impossible. Dozens of dead corpses piled on carts, bloated, stiff horses along the streets, fires smoldering among the wreckage, and barnyards strewn with decaying animals created a putrid stench that attacked all her senses. A few stray hens and gut-fat, slinky cat were the only healthy living things in sight. They stopped to wait on a tram bench near the fountain for Uncle Mosh's friend, the owner of the food shop. Rena noticed a few Jewish mothers dressed in colorful dresses watching their children play near the cluster of bearded men in ankle-length black coats chatting on the street corner. They didn't seem to pay any attention to the 2 trolley cars toppled on their sides, scorched and ruined, or the pack of hairy rats that darted in and out of the alleyway. A trolley car clanked along. Pretty ladies, handsome gentlemen sitting behind sparkling windows. It reminded Rena how many times she'd ridden a trolley with Sarah from one end of the town to the other, just to see the sights of the city and, yes, to feel the exhilaration such freedom produced in her soul. Uncle Mosh, when do you think the Nazis will stop us from using... This isn't Berlin, Rena. Don't worry yourself unnecessarily. Let's talk about your musical talent and the Imperial Academy of Music in Vienna. That's where you studied, isn't it? Yes, such wonderful memories. Papa says you're very famous. Just how many masterpieces have you written, Uncle Mosh? His skull cap kept slipping to the side of his head. He adjusted it again. Oh, it's not the number anyways, Isket. What matters is living the life you are born to live. I believe each human being has something important to contribute to this earth. As a trolley passed, she noticed an alarming sight. 6 young men, clad in unfamiliar clothes, with big black batons and agitated expressions, stood around the gateway. Look, Uncle Mosh. What's it, Sket? Over there, those teenagers with bats. Rena felt a scream coming out of her mouth and stopped it with the palm of her hand. Look, they're pulling Jews into those gateways. Good God. Mercy, why are they doing this? Atrocious pigs. He stood up for a better view. They're cutting off their sidelocks and beards. He hesitated, then sat down and fiddled with his hands in his lap. As an old man, Rena knew he could not rescue the poor souls. 3 minutes passed like 3 hours, the tension buzzing every inch of her. Eyes wide, Rena saw other men nearby run away from the place, afraid to defend the victims. They're using knives and razors, Uncle. Look, blood. They have a rabbi now. Sit down, Rena, he said quietly, pulling on her jacket sleeve. Don't draw attention to us. Those devils don't deserve they deserve something worse than... Uncle Mosh reached for her arm again, but she pulled away. No, Diska. Shush! She remembered now. She'd saved Jonathan when a group of Nazi youth started hitting and kicking him behind the schoolyard back in Berlin. In her mind's eye, she saw a large blonde one standing over her with his big black baton. With one heavy swing, he had broken open the cabinet of medical instruments in her father's office. Inches from her face, he had relieved his fury. Herr von Roth of the German embassy was killed in Paris last night by some Polish Jew boy. He slammed his fist on the medicine cabinet next to her, causing some of the bottles to tumble and break on the floor. His eyes narrowed with contempt. How much do you Jews think we're going to take before we explode? She thought, how much do you Nazis think we Jews are going to take before we explode? She darted across the road toward the group of molesters, waving her arms. But in her mind, she saw her attacker. She saw the murdering faces of Nazis on the riverbank in Berlin. She shouted and yelled, attracting every eye on the street. Stop, 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 you dumbcoffs, you stupid barbarians. Leave the rabbi alone. With her solid Oxford, she kicked them and stomped on their toes, hollering all the while. Stop it, leave him alone. Don't you have mothers? You no good thugs. One of the muggers turned on her and kicked her with his big black jackboot. She stumbled backward, the breath knocked out of her. When she got to her feet, she felt the veins in her neck filling with blood. His boots of steel moved like black creatures coming toward her again. Then she remembered her hidden weapon. She'd known fear when she'd been burned on the night of broken glass. But she was little then. These bastards would not get away with it this time. Jonathan was right. There was a point when a person had to stand up and be counted, danger or not. Suddenly, she wanted to see his body bloody and slashed from her blows, but she couldn't get to the dagger fast enough. When his arm swung down to hit her in the head, she ducked and plowed her teeth into his pants. She bit him as hard as she could through the material. Shrieking in pain, he jumped back. Without a doubt, she'd won the round. Losing her balance, she fell face down in the gutter. As she struggled to her feet, other people surrounded the men, raised fists and tire irons, and the brutes ran away. As she brushed herself off, she noticed another pair of shiny black boots standing on her left. Her eyes tracked the boots to the black pant legs, the belt, and finally the buttons. She didn't need to look up to know the black uniformed figure towering over her was an SS officer. She shuddered, looking down at the ground. "Excuse me, sir, but someone had to do something, officer, sir." Realizing she addressed an SS sent a chill of terror through her, sharper than ever before. She had no power to control her trembling. Had she been in different shoes, she would have run away as fast as she could. She almost tripped over her feet as she rose. He reached for her and took her arm to help her regain her balance. She pulled back with a start, not wanting his murderous hand to come in contact with her skin. Oh, no. This was the moment she feared ever since the Germans took over Warsaw. He would do whatever he wanted. Would he blow her head off? She brushed the dirt off her red sleeve and stood with her shoulders back, stiff and prepared. This wasn't her first bout with death. "You saved the rabbi." "I've never witnessed anything so astounding," he said in a kind voice. "I'm sorry I didn't come upon these villains before you had to risk harm." "I don't know what possesses boys like that. You are very brave, Fräulein." She opened her eyes, but kept her gaze level with his buttons. "I'm really not brave, sir. I just couldn't stand by and do nothing." Suddenly, the young officer with the double lightning bolts on his lapel lifted her chin. "My, not only are you brave, you are extremely beautiful in that red coat." With a faltering voice, she heard herself thanking him, her knees almost buckling under her. She stared at each of his gold buttons. "Oh, thank you." Relieved that he was not going to arrest her or kill her, she decided to speak to him in German. "Danke, good sir. It was an honor to be of assistance to someone in need." "How many languages do you speak, Fräulein?" His eyes seemed different from the other Nazis. When she examined his countenance, he looked rather nice. "Don't hate Nazis, pity them," Sarah often said. Not too many, sir. I speak Hebrew, German, Polish, Yiddish, and a few words of English." As he inspected her from head to toe, she felt her toes wiggling in her shoes, her face hot with color. He was an oak of a man, 6 feet tall, blonde hair, light bluish-green eyes, a mintish color. If he wasn't wearing that uniform, he might be less repulsive. You have a comely face, Fräulein. Such fine, delicate skin. I would love to paint you. What was going on? Was he flirting with her? But he was a Nazi. There was no way to trust him. Just say thank you and be gone. But she found herself wanting to talk with him a little longer. Paint? You're an artist, then? Yes, I suppose some people might consider me an artist. I haven't had the time for such luxuries since the war began. Why was he staring at her? He didn't take his eyes off her, not off her face, didn't blink, didn't pay attention to the clank of the streetcar or the children playing. Should she agree to his request? I guess it would be fun to be painted. She wondered what he really meant when he said, I would certainly enjoy the privilege. My name is Rolf. The shadows of Berlin, she knew, had tangled her attitude toward the opposite sex and given her a rather unusual nonconformist edge, so the feeling of interest this man generated in her made her nervous. Until now, she hadn't noticed her uncle pulling on her sleeve. Thank you, sir, she said to the SS officer who seemed so out of place among the Orthodox Jews. He reminded her of handsome, blonde German boys back in Berlin. He didn't wear a wedding band. She turned on her heel, knowing she could never like one of Hitler's evil henchmen. He had such a benign expression, though. How could he work for the Reich? After her uncle thanked him for his kind words and tugged her away, she looked back at him over her shoulder. She couldn't refrain from returning his smile. A trace of magnetism lingered in their gaze, a touch of shared energy she'd never known before. It sent chills down her neck and over her shoulders when she realized he must have felt it too. While many hands swabbed off her soiled coat, other hands passed her pieces of fruit, muffins, and hard green candies. Men and women kept repeating, You saved the rabbi. You are so brave. The Almighty will bless you with blessings from heaven. You will have a long life. Rena smiled at everyone and thanked them for their praise as she searched for those unusual eyes still lingering among the throng. But the Nazi was gone. And that is the end of Chapter 5. We will read Chapter 6 next time, and I hope you will stay with me for the readings. And if you would like to buy the book, it's on Amazon, The Last Snapshot by Marilyn Morningstar. You have a great evening, and good night.